So let's go ahead and get started. My name is Mike Bielman. I'm on the university staffing team at Microsoft, and I work with students who are interested in software development positions throughout the world. And Jeanette here does the same thing. So we're going to talk about how recruiting works in a tech company. This could be a Microsoft, a Google, a Facebook. Obviously, I work at Microsoft, so the examples I'm going to be sharing are going to be more tilted towards the way that we run things. But it's very common across the entire industry to approach things in the way that I'm about to talk through. So this is Jeanette and me. When we arrived at St. Petersburg Airport, just like you, we met the bear. So we were very excited about that. Jeanette's been an international university recruiter for a couple of years now. She lives in Seattle. And same with me, about 2 years with the company, and I live in Seattle as well. So what we're going to talk about today, first is an overview of recruiting. First, from inside the company, the way that we organize ourselves, which will help to inform you about how to navigate an organization, and what to know as a candidate who's looking for a job at a tech company. And then we're going to go into some detail about the overall recruiting process. There's a lot of steps, probably not surprisingly, but you can drill them down to a total of 5. It's the application step, the screening step, the interview step, the job offer step, and then starting at the company. So I'm going to walk through each of those steps to give you an idea of what it looks like. And know that this is a kind of a casual presentation, and we're fairly casual people. So if you have questions, raise your hand, throw questions out there. I'd be happy to address those as we go along. So the point of this is to get you the most out of this next 45 minutes as you can get. So by a quick show of hands, I recognize a few people here from the previous presentation who were all software developers, software engineering background. So for the folks in the room, raise your hand if you're from a software development, computer science background, and that's what you're looking to do. Is that everybody? Okay. So if you end up thinking about business groups or business careers or things like that, just let us know and we'll try to pepper some examples in so that you get a feel for what that's like as well. So how are recruiters organized? Microsoft, for example, is a company of 90,000 people. And so it takes a fair number of recruiters to keep us staffed, especially when we're growing. And so I put together a quick chart here that shows, in general, how most companies organize their recruiting function. So you have the overall global recruiting. This is every job in the entire world connected to a recruiter. Then we filter by candidate type. Is the person an experienced candidate? Do they have several years of experience in the professional world? Did they graduate a few years ago? Or are they a university student? Are they earning their degree, their bachelor's degree, their master's degree, their PhD? Which type of candidate you are will determine which recruiter you might go to. That's the first filter. The second filter that you'll find at tech companies is by job type. And they'll usually go either it's software development or it's not. So in the case of Microsoft, if you are a university student who is into software development and you attend universities in Western Europe, I'm your recruiter. If you are a university student who attends universities in Western Europe and you're not into software development, it's probably going to be somebody else. So that's one thing to know, is that the type of job you're looking for will influence which recruiter you go to. So I specialize in software development. I play around in a few other areas, but that's the most of what I do. So if you stick with the software development path, then you go down from there. So the region or university. So for example, if you are in Latin America or Mexico, and your software development and your university, then this is your recruiter. His name is Ben Mercer. That's kind of how this is structured. So we'll talk a little bit later about how to navigate that to find out who your recruiter is. But I want you just to have that in the back of your mind, that there is always one point of contact for your type of person, where you go to school, what you're studying, what do you want to do. But it can sometimes be a little bit hard to find. So we'll talk about how to find that right person. So sticking with the Microsoft example, here's a map of the world. And you'll see that I've colored it. So purple here is all one region when we think about Microsoft software development jobs. This is the purple region. All of this belongs to Ben Mercer. He'd be your recruiter. The brown here is sort of Middle East and Africa. If you're software development, attending universities in Middle East and Africa, Jeanette's your recruiter. So companies will structure it in that kind of way. In a little more detail, within those regions that I talked about. So I'm Western Europe. Jeanette is Middle East and Africa. I can't go to every single university that's in Ireland, UK, France, Italy, Switzerland, Spain, Portugal, and Iceland. I can't do it. And so we have to prioritize where we go. And so what we have are what's called priority universities or target universities. And these are the universities that get on the ground in-person time with us. So for example, in the UK, which is one of my countries, some priority universities for us would be Oxford, Cambridge, and Imperial College London. I go there at least once a year talking to students in person just like this. Another example would be in Switzerland. There's 2 universities there that we go to every single year. We have the same thing in Germany and in Russia with Moscow State and St. Petersburg State. The reason we have to prioritize target versus non-target is because we can't be everywhere at once, and there's a limited amount of budget and time that we have. So every company will approach it in a similar way. There are certain places they can go to every year, certain ones they can go to every other year, and certain ones they don't go to at all. The key thing to know is that whether we go to your university or not, we encourage you to apply. So there's another tier that we talk about, and here's the other universities throughout Europe that are targets for us. We would call these other ones experimental universities. It's places that we haven't gone regularly in the past, but we're really interested. So when we're thinking about new places we want to explore and where we might want to go, we think about academic reputation of the program we're interested in. From a software engineering standpoint, we usually think about computer science. We look at where the enthusiastic students are, who's participating in Imagine Cup, who's a Microsoft student partner. Some examples of this would be Jacobs and Imperial. So Jacobs University in Germany and Imperial College in the UK. 2 years ago, we had never been there before. Now we go there every single year, and their students are among the most successful that we have of any university in the world. So what I want to impress upon you is that there's sort of the places we already go, and the places that we might go, and the places that we haven't yet gone. It's not a judgment about anything other than the fact that we have seen success there in the past or we haven't. So any place can become a target. Any country, any university. So some key takeaways. When you are looking for what companies are coming on campus, that can be a great way to find jobs. Also look at the ones that maybe haven't come yet. That could be a Microsoft, it could be a Facebook, could be a Google. You can apply to those just the same. So whether we go there or not could be influenced by our past success, could be influenced by our relationships with professors or students, or it could be based on current events. If there's something going on geopolitically that's creating a lot of instability, we may not be able to go there this year, but the students should apply anyways. Big companies have a lot of recruiters. So the map that I showed you, every different color was a different recruiter. And then if you looked in like the US and Canada, it was colored black. It's because there are so many more recruiters in the US and Canada. There are a ton. And so you have to identify who the right one is. Usually the best way to do that is on the company website. If you go to our website, for example, Microsoft.com/university, you can click on, okay, software development, and then you can identify where your country is, and then boom, I might pop up, or Jeanette might pop up. And now you know the exact one person who you have to get in contact with who's going to be able to help you connect to that job that you want. If for some reason the company doesn't have a website like that, let's say they're a little bit smaller, you might find them on LinkedIn. So you might go on LinkedIn and look, okay, who are all the recruiters at Google, for example, and then see if you can identify which one is dealing with your region, et cetera. And finally, I'll say it again, you should apply no matter what, regardless of whether we visit the campus or not. Everyone has an equal chance of getting hired. So we're going to switch gears, but before I do, I want to just take a quick pause. So we talked about how recruiters are organized, how companies split up the work, why we go to certain countries or universities and not others, and how to find your recruiter. In just that content, are there any questions so far? Okay. Jeanette, you're not going to like question bomb me, something crazy? Maybe later. All right. So let's talk about the recruiting process. What you should expect from the moment you submit a resume until the day that you start the job. So first, the application phase. You have to identify the right job. This can sometimes be the hardest thing because remember when I was in university and I was thinking about what do I want to do with my degree. I didn't always know what the right job was or wasn't. One of the better things you can do is simply look at the job postings and the qualifications and see what the company says about that job. If you're thinking, hey, I really want to be a software developer, and they're saying, yep, the software developer for this position needs C++ experience or needs Java experience, and you don't yet have it, you could apply, but your chances are going to be a little bit lower compared to if you already had that experience. So look for the right jobs, the right postings that match what you want to do and what you're qualified for. Look carefully at all the available positions that might be a good fit. Tailor your CV to that position. Your resume or your CV, we can use those terms interchangeably for a lot of different, for most people. That's your one page to tell the recruiter or whoever's looking at your resume that, yes, I am qualified for this job. Now, I will tell you that companies use the CV as there's one of two answers. It's either yes or no. So I get a stack of 100 resumes, and I'm looking through it, and I'm either saying, yes, we should talk to this person on the phone, or no, I don't see enough that we should. And so that's your one chance to get into that yes pile and get on the phone with somebody. So it can be one of the most important things that you create as part of your job search process to make sure that you're going to get in the yes pile each and every time when you're applying for the right position. And then once you've done your research and you have your CV ready to go, you apply online at the company website. You can also email your recruiter. Then it's going to go to somebody like me or like Jeanette, and we're going to take a look at it. We're going to screen for things like, what's your university experience? What degree are you earning? What courses have you completed? What projects have you worked on? What work experience do you have? This could be paid experience, it could be unpaid experience. To me, it doesn't really matter as long as it's really good experience. Detail the important facts about what you did. So you're going to say, I was the software developer at XYZ company, and as part of that, here are the key things that I worked on. I used C++ to develop blah, 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 blah. That's your chance to give me some content and some meat about what exactly you did, what you learned. By doing that, you allow someone like me to read the experience that you've gotten in the past and say, hey, I think the experience he already has might make him ready for this job he's applying for. You've got to satisfy that question in my mind with your CV. And here's the disappointing thing. You may or may not hear back. So you might tailor your CV, you might put it online, you might submit it to 100 companies, and each company will have its own policy or way of treating that, whether you're going to get a customized response from the company or not. Some will send you, hey, thanks, but no thanks. Some will send you nothing at all. So it can be discouraging for people when they apply to a lot of places and they're not hearing something. At Microsoft, you can sign into the account that you create, and you can look and see what's happening to your application, but that doesn't always happen. So I guess what I would also say with this is don't be discouraged. Chances are that there's a lot of other students who are applying for the same job at the same time, and so your patience can become very important. An example from Microsoft is that we just opened up the application system for people to start applying for this entire upcoming year, so from July 1st until June 30th of 2014. Now, I can start looking at those resumes now, but I can't start really interviewing anybody until August or September. So their application may sit there for a month or 4 weeks or 6 weeks until I do something with it, because I just don't have anything to do with it yet. So your patience is going to be important as well. So let's say you get through the application phase, the person reads your resume, they say, yes, we want to talk to this person. What happens next? Then you enter the screening stage. And this will be common across most companies. It's a first-round screen where you get on the phone with somebody, or it could be in person if they happen to be visiting your university at that time. It's going to be 30 to 60 minutes, depending on the company, and they're going to be looking for things like, what are the past projects that you've worked on? If you're applying for an engineering job or a coding job, they might have you do some real-time problem solving with them, having you code a problem for them, do some testing, designing a user interface, thinking about customer experience. The key things to think about when you're working on these types of problems is that chances are you've already been trained in your university coursework to answer similar questions. It's just taking what you learned in university and applying it here. So for example, They may ask you a very basic testing question like, hey, imagine that I hand you my computer mouse and I ask you to test it for me. Talk me through it. It can be very tempting to say, oh, that's really easy. Okay, so I'm going to push some buttons. I'm going to make sure that when I move around, that the mouse moves around. I'll make sure it turns off. Might look into battery life. Chances are they're not looking for just kind of like running your mouth, saying whatever comes to mind. They want to see you go through it in a structured, disciplined way. Just like when you're solving problems in university coursework, they want you to see you do it the same way in your interviews. So if you're talking about a computer mouse, think about it in terms of functionality, in terms of user experience, in terms of the actual, like the longevity. Is it going to break? What if I drop it? Go through it section by section and show your thought process. That's the most important thing. So I said in the resume stage, the application phase, what I'm saying is, hey, should we talk to this person on the phone? Now, what I'm thinking as a recruiter is, should I bring this person in for final round of interviews? Final round interviews are kind of expensive. At Microsoft, we have your interviewers come in who are talking to you, their time, your hotels, your flights. It's a couple $1,000 decision at the minimum in every case. And so in my 30 minutes on the phone with you, I'm trying to decide, okay, does this person have a decent shot, from everything I've heard during this last 30 minutes, of getting a job at Microsoft? That's what I'm thinking about. So you'll want to show me that you are smart, that you're analytical, that you can problem solve on the phone. So let's say I say, okay, yeah, I think he can do this. Next, you're going to hear back, and you're going to find out how your screen went. Usually, you're going to hear within 1 to 3 weeks, but that'll vary by company. So again, your patience ends up coming into play. Some companies will answer it within a couple of days. Some might be a lot longer than that. One of the tough things about screens is that you probably shouldn't expect to hear like feedback on, here's the good things you did, here's the things you should improve on. Chances are you're not going to hear that from a screen. A lot of companies won't invest time in doing that, or there may be legal implications of doing it. At least within the United States, for example, there are certain employment laws in place that make companies very hesitant to provide feedback to people who interview, because they may get in trouble with a lawsuit or things like that down the line. And so they just end up making a general statement of, yeah, we're not going to provide feedback. It's just too risky. So while you're going to want to hear feedback, chances are you're probably not going to at this stage. So let's say you pass your screen. Now you're doing final round interviews. It's going to be 3 to 5 interviews for Microsoft in person, and it'll last 3 to 5 hours, and it's going to be intense. We're going to fly you in to our interview location. You'd meet with the recruiter in the morning, and we'd kind of prep you on what to expect that day. And then you're going to spend the next 3 to 5 hours doing some coding, some testing, and some problem solving with our full-time people. So they'll usually be like test managers, development managers. They'll have 10 to 15 years of experience at least in the company, and they're going to really grill you to find out what is it that you know, what's your thought process like, what's your problem solving like, and what don't you know. The things that you don't know aren't necessarily a bad thing, but they want to know what you don't know as well as what you do know, so they can make the right call, either to hire you or not. And then if they do hire you, to place you in a place where you're going to be most successful. So let's say you answer all the questions great, but you have a big gap when it comes to data mining. They're not going to place you on data mining for your first full-time job. They're going to want to assess what your strengths are. So if you're a software engineer, some questions you're going to get asked are going to be around data structures, algorithms. You're going to have to write clean, efficient code. One thing that throws people is that you might get a problem in front of you where it's like, hey, solve this problem, and they're going to give you a marker and a pen, and you're just going to go onto a whiteboard and start coding. Usually people are used to coding in like a Visual Studio, so that can throw people. And the other thing is just make sure that you think about the problem before you start. So if you can figure out the logic of a problem first, the code begins to write itself. If you start coding right away and you realize that your logic was wrong, then you're having to backtrack and erase a whole bunch of stuff. In addition to that, you might be doing some unit testing, some debugging, and they may ask you questions about your past projects, your past experiences. But in general, if it's a software interview, they're going to go really deep on having you do real-time problem solving with them. A good way to prepare for this is by doing coding competitions. So ACM, Top Coder, those are really great ways to get ready for something like this, where they throw a problem at you and you have to start figuring out a solution to it. That's exactly what these interviews are like. You can also find out more by going on the websites. Like we have sample stuff up on our website, Microsoft Jobs blog or .com/university. You can just go to any search engine and type in like computer science, or computer programming case questions or interview questions, and practice, practice, practice. So let's say you've done your interview, and now you're ready for the results. That'll usually happen between 1 day and 1 week of your interviews. You could receive yes, we're going to give you an offer. It could be a no, we're not going to give you an offer. Or it could be, hey, not right now. Maybe the interviewer saw that you weren't quite ready for a full-time job. Maybe there were some gaps in your knowledge they wanted you to address first. And you may get some feedback around that to help you to improve. It'll vary by company how much you actually hear from us, but know that as well. So let's say that you get the job offer. Here's where it becomes most people don't see this as part of their daily life. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this because it can get confusing really fast. So a job offer consists of 3 main parts. The first part is your pay. That's your base salary. That's what you're going to get every single year, no matter what. There could be a signing bonus. There could be, hey, we're going to offer you, I'm making this number up, $100 a year to work for us, plus a signing bonus of $10. So on your first paycheck, you get $110, right? Then there could be company stock as well. That's money that you will get over a period of time. So let's say that the company stock is $100, and you'll get that over the course of 5 years. That means that in the first year, you'll get $20 worth of stock, the next year 20, the next year 20. So those are the 3 components of pay. The next one is healthcare and retirement. This varies by country that the job is in. So in the United States, there's not government-run healthcare in most cases, and there's not like a countrywide pension plan. And so Microsoft, for example, or Google or Facebook will have part of their job offer be healthcare for you and your family. That could be medical, it could be pharmaceuticals, could be a pension in some companies, it could be a 401k. That's an important part of your long-term financial stability. So look closely at that section. And then finally, there's sort of the other section. Could be things like vacation time, relocation coverage, immigration assistance, discounts on software. At Microsoft, no matter where you're moving to in the world, let's say you're moving from South Africa to a job in Redmond, we're going to pay for all of that. And we're going to sponsor you for immigration so that it becomes a really easy thing for you. Finally, be sure to evaluate the whole offer, not just the pay. So if you look at a standard job offer, let's say the pay is worth $50,000, 50,000 US dollars, and it's in the US. This section here could be worth another $25,000 or $30,000 when it comes to health care coverage for you and your family, when it comes to retirement savings. So an offer from one company to another may have more or less in either category. What you want to do is look at the entire package and see what it does for you and for your family, if applicable. Because that's the bottom line amount of every single offer, is those 3 categories combined. And then finally, you accept a job offer. So certain components, like I said from the previous slide, might be negotiable, but they aren't always. So if you look at like a Microsoft, like most of it's not negotiable. Like when we offer you a salary and a signing bonus if applicable and a company stock and those kinds of things, in most cases it's like, hey, here's the offer. Like we thought a lot about this. We know it's appropriate, and do you want it? Other companies might have more flexibility with that. So you may be in a position of negotiating and you may not. Your recruiter will know what their expectations are, and so usually if you start negotiating, they'll either entertain it if they are able to, or they'll shut it down if they can't. When it comes to accepting an offer, you'll have 1 day to a week to accept in general, and the recruiter you're talking to will establish a deadline for you. And then finally, this one's important. Once you accept an offer, it's a firm commitment. So something that we've seen from some students in the past is they say, yes, I'm accepting the offer, I can't wait to start there, and I'm going to keep interviewing, and if I get something else, I'll accept that one too. There's a lot of consequences for doing something like that. And so what I want you to know is don't accept an offer from a company like Microsoft or any company until you know that's what you want to do. That's really important, because if you accept an offer and then you go back on it and you end up going somewhere else, it's going to burn some bridges. And let's say 5 years from now, like let's say the company you went to doesn't really work out, and then you want to come back to Microsoft, and we remember what you did to us last time. You don't want to go through that process. So just make sure that you're serious the first time around with any offer you accept, and you'll never get in trouble. Let's say you accept the offer, you move, you or your family to the location, you get the immigration sponsorship, all that kind of stuff. You're ready to start. Well, your start date is going to depend on a couple different things. It's going to depend on your availability. When are you graduating from school? When can you start? Do we have a preference? Are there big projects coming up? What's the immigration situation look like? So for example, if you want to come to the US, you'll have to get a visa if you're not already a US citizen. And those visas can have specific start dates. So you may say, I want to start now. We may say, we want you to start now, but the US government says you can't start till 2 months from now. Just know that there's going to be delays in your start date if you're moving from one country to another. So finally, how to succeed overall. Your resume CV is really important. So please make sure it's up to date. Please make sure you're listing your projects, your relevant courses, your degree, and give me details about the things that you've accomplished, the things that you've worked on. That's your ticket to a conversation with any recruiter in any company. And you have to succeed at that stage before you can even think about the rest of this stuff. List your skills, list your accomplishments. Talk about any other related activities, such as being a Microsoft student partner. Let's say you want to talk about ACM or Top Coder. Talk about your projects through Imagine Cup. Those are all really important things to put on there. And then for your interviews, know that at each stage with any tech company, the interviews might be ambiguous. They might be strange questions that you haven't thought about. We want you to think aloud. We want you to ask clarifying questions. So if I, for example, said, hey, I want you to test a phone for me. The first question you should be asking is, what kind of phone is this? Is it a smartphone? Is it a basic phone? How is the phone going to be used? Who's the target customer? Is it more of like a business-oriented phone like a BlackBerry? Is it more of a general phone for entertainment like an iPhone? Start asking questions so you can define what the problem is. Then talk aloud as you're working through the problem so that I know what you're thinking about, and learn throughout the interview. It's okay to get stuff wrong early in the interview. Like, we get that. You might be nervous. There might be some things going on. If you catch yourself making some mistakes, like, correct those in the interview. And let's say the first interview, you know you got it wrong, and then between the first and the third, you thought of the right answer. Talk to the third interviewer about that. Say, hey, I know I got this wrong during the first interview. I figured it out. Here's the answer. We want people who have drive, who have tenacity, who strive for good solutions. So that's a lot of information. So I want to stop now and open it up to questions that you might have for me or for Jeanette. Yeah. Yeah. That's fine. Like if you need to decline an offer, you need to decline an offer. So some key things about declining an offer would be make sure you're being honest with your recruiter about the things that you're thinking about. So let's say that you and I are having a conversation, and you're like, yeah, I'm really interested in Microsoft. I want to work there, but I just don't, like I have a family, and we don't want to move to the U.S. Like, I'm really concerned about that. Do you have anything closer in Europe, for example? Be honest about that, as opposed to saying, hey, I'm really concerned about location and things like that, and then we get you a great offer in, say, London as opposed to the US, and you're like, nah, I don't want it because, you know, I feel like living in wherever it is. Like, just be honest with me so that we can try to address your concerns and get you to a point where you'd want to accept it. Now, if we end up not being able to do something, let's say there are no jobs in London and that's the only place that you want to work, then I get that, you know, like I totally get it. So just be honest with me about that. Yeah. Sure, sure. Yeah, it's certainly, I would say it depends maybe a little bit on what job you're going for. And it's never a bad thing to have additional experience. But let's say that you have applied to a job that's pure software development. And your qualifications are software development and PM, but you don't really bring all the software development experience to the table that we're looking for because you spent so much time being a PM. That may not make you qualified for that software development job, but you might be qualified for a different job, like a PM job. So it's not a yes or a no or a good or a bad. It's about finding the right job that's a good fit for the experience that you have and what you want to do. Yeah. It's very similar. So like in a company like Microsoft, when we're hiring recruiters or salespeople or marketers, they have the same process. The interview questions are different. But the interview style is the same. So like in my interviews 2 years ago at Microsoft, they were asking me big, broad, ambiguous questions that didn't have any sort of right or wrong answer. And I had to start asking clarifying questions to define what the problem was they wanted me to figure out. The style is exactly the same. Sure. Microsoft Research would be a bit different because in research they're hiring you, in most cases, to work in a very narrow and specialized area of academics. And so we're going to test, like someone coming in as a software developer, we're going to test them on a range of different questions in computer science. If you're coming in as, like, you know, the preeminent expert in data mining, for example, they're going to grill you super hard on that area because you're coming into the company to contribute in that very specialized discipline. So the interviews will be a little bit different. Yeah. Yeah. Interns are the #1 source of top talent at Microsoft. So when we're looking at who we want to hire, or sorry, when we look at you know, the first couple of years of someone's career, how well do they do? Do they outperform their peers? Do they stay at Microsoft? The #1 source of talent that we have is people who interned with us and then accepted a full-time job offer right afterwards, right? So we invest very heavily into our interns because we know that over the long term, they are, in general, from a statistical standpoint, the top performers. So when it comes to intern management and things like that, it's important to have a robust intern program where they're getting a lot of support from their manager as well as consistent feedback and evaluation. So at the end of each so we're in intern season right now. We have over 1,000 interns in Redmond this summer. At the end of this season, a certain number of those will get job offers and a certain number won't. And we make those offers based on the feedback and evaluations of their manager. So I'm speaking in a broad sense here, but if you have a really strong evaluation system in place for your interns, so they have meaty projects they're working on, they have support from their manager as well as evaluation, at the end of the summer you should have a pretty good idea of what their strengths and weaknesses are. And at Microsoft, for example, we feel confident if the person is graduating within a year from now, saying, yep, you have a job. Yeah. Yep.
What is the criteria from the university to be hybrid?
It's a lot of it has to do with past success. So we look at what schools we have a lot of engagement with, what schools we know that there's a quality program at, and then from there we make judgment calls about, okay, let's try this university, let's try that university. So if I think about like Jacobs University in Bremen, Germany, it was a place that we had never been to 2 years ago, and now we go there all the time because we're like, wow, there's these fantastic students there, and they're really engaged, and they're excited when we come there, and they have a great academic program. We have that same sort of analysis that we do at universities across the world. And so, so when students ask, like, hey, how can I have my university become a target university? Those are the key things that we think about when we're deciding where we want to go. So there's no magic formula to it. There's not an algorithm that we created that, we in-pops the data and out-pops a target university. But it's a little bit based on experience and what we know about a region or a country. Yeah.
Having interns or full-time employees from specific university make higher priority group?
Yeah, in my case it does. So we're going to be doing a lot more in France this upcoming year than we have in the past. And part of that is driven by the students. So if I talk about the students who get no visits from us, they don't see a recruiter, they don't see us come on campus and do presentations, but they apply anyways. They apply anyways. I see their CVs and I'm like, wow, these are really quality students. They get screened, they get interviewed, they get the job. And then I go back and I'm like, wow, like we've found some really great people at this university in France. We need to go there. So it's, in a lot of cases, it's those students who are applying from places we don't already go that can drive our decision making when it comes to where we want to go next by representing for their schools.
I think another big part of that as well is the referrals. So if you know someone at your university that's gotten a full-time offer or that had an internship last summer, those are some of your best contacts when you're looking for jobs to go to. So whether they're at a smaller company, maybe locally, that you're really interested in, or at a big tech company, internationally that's outside of your school. So really use those people as a resource because they're your number one kind of contact into the company. So they can either submit your resume or they can tell you a little bit about the company culture, some things that they liked about it, some things they didn't. They can give you the recruiter contact information. And so those are people that you really want to use if you can't get a hold of your recruiter. And I go to former interns, I go to former hires that I've made within my region to ask for referrals because sometimes they're the people that are in the schools that get to work with other students, that get to see their projects and see what they do on projects or see what their contribution is. And so they're some of the best people to also refer people. So they can be kind of your best friend in a way.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're going to go where we can find great people. So, if you and your friends apply and are like, wow, like, okay, it looks like we have to be going there from now on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll let you take that one. Do you have African universities in mind?
Yeah. So the cool thing about the MEA region, the Middle East and Africa region, and I won't go very deep into it, but because it's my region, I get really passionate about it, is that there's a lot of opportunity there. So as a company, as Microsoft company and corporation, when it comes to university recruiting, we haven't spent a whole lot of time in previous years in the Africa space specifically. But in these next upcoming years, Microsoft has been doing a lot with programs like the Microsoft for Africa program, where they're going into African countries and they're trying to build jobs for Africans to work within Africa and then also elsewhere at big tech companies. So they're starting to really rebuild that infrastructure there for recruiting and for jobs. So for me specifically, a lot of what I'm doing right now is trying to get my feelers out to really start establishing like what schools are going to be those top tier schools that I know I'm going to go every time and kind of get talent from. So, the countries that I've been to over the last year range and candidates that I've interviewed and hired range everywhere from Algeria, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Israel, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, South Africa. So we kind of go all up and down Nigeria. And so we've reached students from there, but the thing is I'm not getting as many applications from some of the other countries, and so that's one of the biggest things that we're trying to do right now, or what I'm trying to do, is kind of get the feelers out. And I would say that's for all of the international recruiters, is it's hard to get your name out and get all the information out to every single school. So that's where like utilizing MSPs is huge. So if you have an MSP partner and you're like, I want to know more information about how to get a job at Microsoft, how can I do that? Hopefully they can connect you with a contact that maybe can connect you somewhere. But feel free to go online to microsoft.com/universities, because that will provide all the hiring information. If you're interested in applying at Microsoft, that's where you would go. And my contact information is on there, so you can definitely email me and we can talk about a little more if you have some stuff.
And one thing I would say, so going back to this map, this is the map for this year. If you go back 3 years, so year 2010, I came to Microsoft 2011. In 2010, this map would have had exactly 2 colors on it, because there were 2 people who were recruiting for the entire world. And they weren't doing much in-person stuff. There was one person who sort of covered, all of Europe, all of Africa, all of the Middle East, China, Japan, Russia, everything. In the past 3 years, this is how much has changed. And this is at a company that's as big and as global as Microsoft. And so if you looked at, the map for Google or map for Facebook, it would be exactly the same if you looked at 3 years ago versus now. The reason we have, added 6 recruiters in the past 2 or 3 years is because we're finding more and more fantastic students than we were before. So, like my first region was all of this, right? All of it. And now this year, it's just this little sliver here, because we're getting so much better about connecting the students in places. So there's going to be so much more happening over the next couple of years when it comes to our presence throughout the entire world. Yeah. It's the same process. Now, we definitely, when we're thinking about someone to come in for an internship versus a full-time job, we'll be thinking about them having different levels of experience at that point in their lives, but you'll get the exact same questions. It just might be that the expectations for a full-timer might be a little bit higher, because you should have more experience by now.
So considering that a European student might want to apply for an internship, would they still, I'm guessing they would have to fly to the US, for example?
Not necessarily. So we do fly some students from Europe to the US for interviews, but what happens more often is that we hold hiring events within Europe for United States jobs. So we'll fly interviewers from the United States to Europe, and then students from Europe will come in and do some interviews. Yeah, but there's a lot of variation there. So it could be Europe, it could be the US, it just depends. Yeah, right here. No, they're not expected to know everything. So we look for your foundational skills, your analytics, your problem solving, your how smart you are. That's the first thing we look at. Now, let's say that all of your experience is in Java, and the team that you're joining is coding in C#. Your first week or 2 will likely be just like a boot camp in C#, right? Because we know that people learn different languages, and the particular language you learn isn't all that important to us, because once you master one language, once you're a C++, you're awesome at it, it becomes relatively easy to become really good at other languages too. So we don't worry so much about that. Yeah, right here.
For the internship, do you have usually develop Microsoft APIs and
I mean, you might if the internship includes projects that work on those things, but if it doesn't, then you wouldn't have to know that stuff. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yeah.
This guy's had it.
Oh, sorry. Right here. Sorry.
So repeat your question.
If you get a reference from a DPE or an ADE.
Oh, okay. any Microsoft employee, I think, is good. It's not just limited to interns that refer or other full-time maybe in Redmond. It's really anybody at Microsoft. Yeah, so recommendation letters are great. So you can definitely send those, but really just like a quick blurb as to like, this is the work that I've done, this is why I think that they would be a great fit, here's their CV. And so typically you would want to, whether you're giving your information to, you know, a DP or a TAL or, you know, an MSP or somebody else to refer you into the company. If you're going to do that, make sure you include your contact information in your resume for them to pass along to the recruiter. That's the biggest thing, because I know if I receive referrals, the first thing I'm going to check for is their CV attached. If it's not, then I'm going to be sending an email back saying, thank you, do you mind, you know, collecting the CV for me? The next thing that I'm going to ask you to do is to go online and apply. So everything that we do as recruiters, unless you apply online, we really can't touch you. So because you have to initially express interest in the company, and then we can kind of move forward. And that has to deal with legal matters. And so if I were to just come to you, let's say like to Omar, and I was just like, hey Omar, like I want to interview you, but he hasn't applied online or anything in the US, that could have some legal ramifications later on if he was just like, this person's stalking me or something, like I didn't want to apply and they forced me. I mean, that's pretty extreme, but you know, so you have to express your interest in the company first, and the way that we, you know, the way that we notice that or, you know, recognize that is by going online and applying. And I would say that's pretty much for almost every single company. So go online, apply, pass your CV along, that's going to be really key, and then provide maybe a small paragraph as to why you think that that person would be a good fit.
What if it comes to a shift of interest in my profession, right? And I was, for example, a software engineer for a couple of years, and then I shifted towards research, and then I want to apply for research. What happens with my CV? I have an extensive background in software development, but I have a really small experience in research. And I want to do research. I'm really good with research. What happens with that two files after first before the interview? What advice would you give me not to go to a middle file?
I would say, first of all, make sure that your CV that you have, let's say it's on the Microsoft website, make sure it's up to date. And make sure that the jobs that you've applied for reflect the things that you're interested in. When I see someone with research experience, I don't think about it one way or another. It could be great, it could be not so great. So if I think about someone who is applying for a software development job, if they've spent the last 6 to 7 years in research and they haven't been doing any coding, any testing, things like that, they may be really rusty. And they may not make it through an interview experience. Or it could be that their research is taking them down that path of still coding, still testing, and so they're going to just completely blow away the interviewers. It could go either way. Just make sure that your CV or your resume reflects the kind of job that you want to get. And if you're applying for a software development job and that's the interview, make sure you're ready to code, because they're going to be asking you to do it.
Okay, but there is a step where you actually test my skills, but I might not get to that step because
Right.
of the CV.
So the CV itself, again, it's like the yes pile, no pile. I'm not going to throw somebody in or out of a pile based on, so I don't focus on research so much because I don't talk to a lot of, the jobs that I staff don't have much of a research background requirement. It's more of a practical software development requirement. So for me, when I see research, I don't think about it one way or another. I'm looking for the practical experience on the CV. That's what's most important to me, for example. Yeah. Yeah. So how would Microsoft partner with another company to? That's outside of my area of expertise. You know, just some general thoughts, and this isn't coming from a place of like knowing that side of Microsoft. Just from me personally, when I think about companies, think about what it is that your company does and where you might fit into the Microsoft structure. So, for example, if your company it has a specialized product that is an add-on to a bigger Microsoft product, that might influence where you go. If it's a service sort of company where you can help us to market more effectively or track our sales more effectively in a region, think about connecting with the sales org. If it's more of a research side of things, you'd have to get in contact with somebody probably from Microsoft Research. And there you'd probably just be doing some searches online for, Microsoft Research, and then whatever it is that your company specializes in, you might find a connection there. But outside of that, I wouldn't have anything too specific to be able to help you with, unfortunately. Yeah? Oh. Great question. Okay, so I'll give you my perspective as a Microsoft recruiter. I never read them. I don't. Because everything I need to know is on the resume. If you've done a good job writing your resume, there's no need for a cover letter for a job at Microsoft. So unless the company says it's required to submit a cover letter, I would not spend your time writing one for that company, because every cover letter has to be customized, right? If it's a good cover letter, it's I'm writing about me applying for this job at Microsoft, and so you start putting in personal things that connect you to the company, and it takes a lot of time to do it. Unless the company says you have to do it, I wouldn't do it. Now, there are some companies who will ask for one, in which case you kind of have to do it. But for the jobs that I do, software engineering, you just don't need one.
I think too, to add on to that, there's a little bit of a difference too between the type of recruiting that Mike and I do versus some other recruiting areas within Microsoft and then other companies. So Mike and I really focus on university recruiting. So what that means is we're focusing on students that are currently in university or have graduated within 1 year. And they fall under our realm of who we can recruit. Now, when you take a step back and you look into possibly like research jobs, if you have your PhD and you're looking at more specialized jobs, that actually might warrant to have a cover letter, because you need to differentiate yourself and explain like your research and areas that you've participated in. And so when you're applying for a very specific job, I would probably have a cover letter ready, because when you get to a higher level of education, the higher you go, the more specialized you're going to get. And the jobs are also going to get more specialized because they're going to be, you're looking at a very particular job. Whereas what we're doing as university recruiters is we have very general jobs that we're offering university students, because we basically hire with the understanding and the knowledge that university students probably don't have very much experience. And that's okay. And that's why as a big tech company, we have a university recruiting team, because we're willing to take that risk on individuals that have a lot of potential and that can show that they can learn and they can develop, and that in the long run, they're going to be a really great investment. But for the first year of a lot of our university hires, to be completely honest, we kind of lose money, because we're trying to teach you and ramp you up on how to provide code and how to develop for a big company, but we know in the long run you're going to be an awesome employee. So that's kind of the difference too about what Mike and I do, and I think that's important to make that distinction, because if you're looking, you mentioned like MSR earlier, or research roles like that, that's going to be a very different field than the type of recruiting that we specialize in.
Yeah, so the MAC program, we pronounce it MAC. In the UK, they say MAC, so I don't know how they pronounce it in other places. So the MAC or MAC program is for, in general, it's for non-software developers or non-core software developers. And it's a development program for people with a pretty wide range of backgrounds to come into a number of different either non-technical or semi-technical positions within the company. A big difference, so this map here is going to be helpful, because this shows you how software development is organized by university recruiters. MAC programs are run country by country. So the UK would be one color, France would be one color, Germany would be one color, and there's going to be a local staffing team that's going to specialize in MAC recruiting from universities in that country to Microsoft mock jobs in those countries. Now, if you contact me, I'll know the right people. I can forward you along, but I won't, at the end of the day, be the right recruiter for you. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So the internship program, it runs year-round, but as you might expect, the majority of the interns come in during the summer months. So, from May or June until August or September. In the U.S. program, it's 10 to 12 weeks long. You're put on a development team where you're given specific responsibilities. Your projects might be ones, you might have a couple of projects, you might have one project. It might be one project that you solely own on your own, or there may be some interfaces with other developers on your team. The idea is that they give you something that you can own and create over the course of the summer. And at the end of it, say, hey, here's what I created, here's what I did in my internship. There's a lot of support there for you. So you have not only your manager that you report to, but also a mentor on the team. There's a lot of, from a social side of things, there's a lot of social activities that go on. So we take the interns to go sailing. They go to all different events throughout. If you're an intern in Seattle, you go to events throughout Seattle. And then at the end of the internship, you have the opportunity to get an offer from us to come back, either for another internship if that's what you need, or a full-time job if that's when you're graduating. So you get paid the whole summer. You get you get spoiled. You do. We going back to that question before about internships. That's the number one source of great talent from Microsoft, is people who interned with us. So we spoil them. We really do.
And I would add on, so the best times to apply, if you are looking at an internship, so the best times to apply would definitely be as early as possible, because what happens, especially for us when we're looking at international candidates to come to Redmond specifically to do an internship, we have a hard cutoff usually, because we have to do visa applications, we have to get you into the country, we have to make sure relocation, and we cover all of that, which is great. And that's a part of one of our benefits that we have at Microsoft, is we hook you up and pair you up with the legal team, and they basically take care of everything. So it's kind of stress-free on your end. But at the same time, that's usually around the end of February, beginning of March, when we have that hard cutoff. So if you apply from, I would say, August until December, that's going to be your kind of prime time to apply for those internships, because what I'm doing as a recruiter is during those months I'm looking at candidates and applications that apply, and I'm looking at the dates that they're graduating and determining whether or not they're going to be an intern or full-time. I'm partnering with the business in so many ways. I'm partnering with the business to say, hey, do you have intern positions available? Yes? Great. So let's put them to this event that I have in January. And so I need to know as soon as possible who those candidates are, because I'm stack ranking my candidates based on what positions we have available in the business. So to answer that part of your question as well, you want to apply as early as possible for all positions, but specifically for interns, because those have a hard cutoff.
Yeah. Yeah. The website's the same. So you would go to Microsoft.com/university. And then from there, you can specify, I'm graduating, I need an internship, here's the type of role I'm interested in. It's all in the same place. Yeah.
Cool. So let's do one more.
Oh, one more.
Time.
Okay. Good question. I would say in the next 6 months to 1 year is fine. Yeah, but you wouldn't want to reapply right away, because not much has changed when it comes to what you know and what your qualifications are. But 6 months to a year later, once you've gotten some more experience, I'd say it's appropriate. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. We'll be up here if you have additional questions, and enjoy the rest of your time here in St. Petersburg.